Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to make stewed apples. So first thing you're going to want to do is get some apples, obviously. You're going to want to take the labels off and probably give them a rinse because they've probably got pesticides all over them, which isn't the best for consumption. If you're really fussy, you can peel the apples. I don't peel the apples, I just leave the skin on. I think it tastes quite nice. Next we're just going to get a pot and fill it up with water and turn it on to high heat, and that can go ahead and begin to warm up and start to boil while we are over slicing the apples. Next you're going to need a chopping board and a decent knife. The bigger the knife usually the better, because you're not going to have to sort of wiggle the knife down through the apple. Up to a certain point you obviously don't want to use a machete to cut the apples. And we're going to start off by just chopping the apples into quarters, like so. And we're going to use a smaller knife to core the apples. I'm just going to use about 7 is usually enough for me in terms of how much stewed apples you want to make. Obviously more is going to take a little longer to cook because you're going to need a bigger pot. Just going to go ahead and chop all of these into quarters. And we're going to have to get the seeds out. Don't want to eat the seeds, I think they're meant to be bad for you. Just got 2 more to go, like so. And last one. I think that's about 7 or 8 actually. I think that might have been 8 apples. And we've got a bunch of quarters of apple. Next you're going to want to just take your apples and point the knife away and just sort of cut a nice little slice down the middle, and once you're done decoring them you can just put them straight in the pot, and they should be good to go. And it shouldn't take too long to do this, depending on how many apples you're using. I would also recommend cutting these little nasty bits off the top. They're not particularly nice to eat and you'll get little tough bits in your stewed apples. I also don't want to cut too deep when you're cutting in to decore the apples, otherwise you'll split the apple in two. If you go down too deep it'll want to sort of pry itself apart and it won't be too good. As you can see, I can see over there the pot is already starting to steam. It's almost going to begin to boil. And we should be about halfway there now. Actually no, we're probably a little less than halfway there. Just continue doing it. Sometimes there's like barely any core left and it just looks like it's already been done, but you still want to take a little layer off because there's like a hard layer in the core that's not particularly tasty and it's sort of harder to chew, and there's not really any good things in there that you want to eat. If you want to be real fanatic-y and make fancy stewed apples, you'd probably go ahead and peel the apples with like a potato peeler or whatever before chopping them up and slicing them up and stuff. And also another fancy thing you could do is chop the apple quarters into like smaller little pieces so you've got more little bits of stewed apple. But I like to leave them whole so I can just sort of munch on a big old piece of stewed apple. As you can see we're almost done. There's apple seeds everywhere. As a bonus you could use the apple seeds to make apple trees, although they'll probably make horrible little crab apple trees and you won't want to eat the apples off of them because they usually taste pretty bad. I did grow one apple tree for about a few years I think, just from apple seed, from a regular store-bought apple, and it never really grew into an apple tree. I mean obviously it would be like 20 years before you'd get a decent sized apple tree that gave you fruit. And we're done. They're all sliced up and we can now just leave them to boil. I would recommend just leaving them to boil until they get soft. Every now and then just come along with a knife or a fork, give them an old poke, and if they're sort of hard they're not ready, and if they just are really squishy and you can just sort of almost just let the weight of the knife drive in, then it's probably ready to go. And I'll be back when it's finished cooking. Now I have been told that you should probably just bring the stewed apples to the boil for a little while and then just let them cool down and they'll sort of cook in the hot water to avoid getting mushy apples, but I quite like a little bit of mushy apple, so I tend to just leave it in there for way too long. As you can see, our apples are coming along. If I give them a little poke here, they're still a bit hard. So I think you probably should leave them in for a little while, just boiling. Even though other people have told me otherwise, I think you should probably leave it on for quite a while. Just really cook them until there's like pretty much no resistance against the knife when you go to poke them, depending on how you like your apples. Another thing you can do to make it slightly tastier is to go ahead and grab yourself a stick of raw cinnamon, which is just bark off of a cinnamon tree or whatever you call it. I don't know what the tree's called actually, or how to pronounce it properly. And you can just go ahead and break the cinnamon into little pieces, just big sort of chunks. Just go ahead and drop them in there and add a little bit of flavour to your apples, make them taste slightly better. Alright, so I'll let them boil for quite a while, and they got pretty hot. The ones on the bottom burnt and the ones on the top weren't cooked properly, and I thought that it wasn't cooked properly because the top ones weren't cooking and the bottom ones were burning to the bottom. So it does pay to stir them. You should probably stir them. That would most definitely help to get better stewed apples. But I don't know, I mean, I like a little bit of burnt apple. Burnt apples are pretty tasty. It's like crispy. It's almost like a treat. I don't know. Anyway, once you're done, you just strain the water out into the sink, probably after you let them sit for a while so that it's not super hot water and you don't get burnt. And then you just serve it with, I would recommend cinnamon sugar. I know it's unhealthy. A slightly healthier alternative is just regular cinnamon powder, and an even healthier alternative would be just some flakes of raw cinnamon bark. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a nice day. Goodbye.